Founded in 2011 by Rob Michaels, a chaplain and former police detective, Serve and Protect provides trauma services for first responders and public safety professionals. And to date, the ministry has helped more than 2,500 public safety professionals navigate through the troubled waters of PTSD, addiction, and suicide prevention, both here in the U.S. and across Canada and Europe as well. Good to have you with us, sir.
Good morning.
As you mentioned in your materials, that June is PTSD Awareness Month. I was not aware that there was a month dedicated to raising
one reason why I'm here.
Yeah, raising the awareness of PTSD amongst first responders. As Valerie mentioned, we think of it with troops that are returning home, that have been in the theater of war, have seen combat, and had to make some really hard decisions. But that same kind of stress level is felt amongst our own police forces, firefighters, EMTs, and the like. So how did you get involved in this?
Yeah, it started, I was actually a police officer in Norfolk, Virginia. I was a detective, and moved to Nashville, actually, got in the music business for a number of years, became a chaplain with the FOP, and now with the FBI. But in 2011, I founded Serve and Protect because it was clear that there were a lot of other issues beyond the spiritual needs that first responders were feeling. Trauma is really a normal response to an abnormal circumstance. Women who have been assaulted. It could be administrative issues on a job, people that are belittled publicly. That can bring trauma. So trauma is a normal response. And in post-traumatic stress is trauma you experience. It manifests itself after the traumatic incident occurred. You know, one of the things that happens is if there's a traumatic incident, there will be a debriefing. They come in, they talk with them, a psychologist or a chaplain will, but that's temporary. That's a quick fix. It's a checkbox.
Right.
What happens is the trauma actually hits them 3 or 4 weeks later. Case in point, in Phoenix, a police officer was involved in a shooting. So there's a 2-week investigative period to make sure it was legitimate. During that time, he started drinking heavy. Our guys don't like to shoot people. We'd rather carry them out in handcuffs than body bags. You can see that even when a police officer's shot, the preponderance of the bad guys are carried out like this, not zipped up in a body bag. And so he was really upset about that. Went out, got in his car, was going to kill himself, was going to go run into a tree. Well, his own department located him. They arrested him for drunk driving and fired him. A month later, he committed suicide because they didn't take the proper steps to find out, why was this guy drinking so heavily? Why did he want to kill himself? Addiction is not a symptom of post-traumatic stress. Anger, rage, depression, separation from friends and family, wanting to isolate, those kinds of symptoms are actual symptoms. What's good that's happening in post-traumatic stress these days is the state of Alaska, the House and the Senate, have now put forth a bill to the governor asking him to try and persuade the American Psychiatric Association to actually deem post-traumatic stress an injury, not a mental disorder. I call it an emotional wound. And so what we did, we put together with an organization called Safe Call Now. I put on LinkedIn, I was gonna do this thing, and I got a call from a guy named Sean Riley. And he said, you know, if you're going to do that, we have a crisis line, so why don't we work together? I called one crisis line, and they said, well, you know, if you come up with $1 million, we can go nationwide. I said, well, if I come up with $1 million, what do I need you for? And so Sean and I have been partners ever since. And when a call comes into the crisis line, the peer advocate, one of Sean's staff, evaluates the caller, determines whether they need to go to residential care, or if it's trauma therapy. Now, when I started this, I built a network of about 5,000 chaplains through associations, but 99% of our calls are not for chaplains. They're from first responders, and now more often than before, we're getting veterans calling in. And it's because of things that they've seen and experienced.
You not only serve first responders, police officers, firefighters, EMTs, but also like corrections officers.
Absolutely.
And
anybody in public safety.
Okay, and what has been the response to your organization? Because I'd imagine hundreds, if not thousands, of public servants really need your assistance.
Absolutely. When people find out what we do, they call. We've got people that give seminars. One of our board members, Dr. Carrie Steiner, was 13 years Chicago police officer. She got her doctorate in clinical psych. She got her doctorate in forensic psychology, and she has an office in Wheaton doing the very same thing. She called and she said, you know, this is what I do. That's what you do. So I'm handing out your information. She was printing it and handing it out. I said, well, you know, I actually have some. I'll send them to you. And the more we talked, I asked her to join the board because her experience and understanding gives us a lot of insight. But, you know, the biggest issue is a lot of guys don't want to come forward. They're afraid. I have people that called and they say, listen, nobody can know. I don't want to use my insurance because they'll fire me. Well, legally they can't, but they do. Maybe not for post-traumatic stress, which would be illegal, but for some other infraction that they might fabricate or whatever. And that's the sad thing.
Yeah.
If we could make it to where, as Alaska wants, it's actually an injury.
Not a mental
Right,
disorder.
because if you're mentally disabled, you can't carry a firearm.
Right.
You know, and that kind of takes away the job. So you've got some guys that in administrative positions that don't understand trauma. So we do seminars. We have partners that do seminars. The National Police Suicide Foundation, Robert Douglas, goes around and does seminars, and he hands out our information all the time. And you can tell when people do seminars because the phone rings.
Yeah.
But what happens is when that call comes into our crisis line, if the person needs residential care, they'll be sent to a residential facility that has been properly vetted for public safety professionals. If they need trauma therapists, they send me the information, their insurance, where they are, their zip code, and I'll actually go to work. And those 2,500 phone calls turn into about 12,000 phone calls because I call every therapist that I locate that is potentially a fit and find out, do you understand our guys? Because it's like I
they
tell
live in
the
a
guy-
little bit of a different world.
They do.
Yeah.
And their typical counseling is different. It's like the guys when they call in, they'll say, man, here's what I'm feeling. Does everybody else feel that way? And I just go, man, we ain't right. I mean, what kind of normal, sane person runs at bullets or runs into a burning building?
Right, right.
I just went down and visited a guy at Vanderbilt about a month ago, Mitch Harrington from Cookeville Police Department. Mitch pulled up on a house fire. He's a police officer. He ran in. The house is ablaze. He doesn't have any protective gear. He ran in to save lives. And what gets frustrating is it was two elderly people that were on oxygen with the little nose things, and they were smoking. It says on the canister, don't smoke. Well, they exploded. And Mitch was burned very bad. But you know what? He didn't think about that. He thought about the potential to save lives. Right. That's who our heroes are.
Yeah. Now, with Serve and Protect, you're, like I said, not just here in the U.S., but also Canada, Belgium, over in different nations in Europe as well. Is it the same kind of work that's being done, or is it the same climate?
Well, Belgium, for example, one of our chaplains called and said, do you think you can find somebody to help a police officer in Belgium? He was there at the bombing. So I went to work, found somebody, and let her have the information, and she made the referral for us. Same in Canada. Canada's had a lot of issue with post-traumatic stress. There was one instance where 8 guys in a month died by their own hand. Every 17 hours, a police officer commits suicide.
Wow.
Right, it's terrible. 85% have post-traumatic stress. Now, I'm going to tell you it's 100%. One of the things that is not listed in the DSR, or the psychiatric dictionary, is one thing that's not listed there is emotional desensitization. You see, when I went on the police department, I can remember one of the first fatalities I ever worked. It was a quintuple fatality. I was a rookie. I was 23 years old, you know, and we pulled up, and my field training officer said, go check on them. They'd hit one of those huge aluminum poles. And I tapped on the window, and all 5 of them had their heads laying back, not a drop of blood, but they hit it doing about 80 miles an hour and snapped their necks. The girl in the middle, the engine came up and crushed her legs. Now, you're sitting there going, yeah. Well, imagine being a 23-year-old guy looking in there going, yeah. One of the last ones I worked that I'll never forget, I was a detective, and I was headed down 26th Street at Colonial Avenue. And the next block up, I could see a car spinning on its roof. Well, I headed on up there, called it in. There was a Volkswagen that was crushed against the telephone pole. 18-year-old college freshman in there. I heard her breathe the last breath. The guy that hit her was drunk.
And then you've got to process that as a human being and as a public safety officer and as just a man and figure out how to deal with it. And that's where
Absolutely.
organizations like Serve and Protect come in to help.
And we do it for free. We're a nonprofit. We don't charge a dime.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to have Robert back on tomorrow to talk a little bit more about Serve and Protect, about post-traumatic stress disorder that our public safety professionals have to navigate and deal with, and a little bit more about PTSD Awareness Month and what we can do as average citizens. To connect with Robert, you can go to serveprotect.org or go to our website, harvest-tv.com. Find an easy way to link back to his site. And again, he'll be with us on Friday's edition of Harvest. Still to come, Pastor Charles has your prayer requests, but up next, Brian Bush has the latest on the Egypt Air Flight recovery efforts. We'll be right back.
Serve and Protect provides trauma services for first responders and public safety professionals. To date, the ministry has helped more than 2,500 people in need. Chaplain Robert Michaels is the founder of Serve and Protect, and he returns to the show to talk about more about, reaching out to first responders, people who protect us every day of our lives. They have, police officers have come under fire in recent years, and yet there is something happening underneath and behind the scenes that we don't even see with these officers who have come under fire for doing their job.
Yes, ma'am. One of the things that's an issue is leadership politically. I'll give you a perfect example. New York City, they affectionately called de Blasio Big Bird. His solution when a police officer encounters a traumatic situation is to close their eyes and count to 10. I'm just going to say it. That's stupid, because he will die. I mean, if you're a bad guy and you see a cop do this and start counting to 10, they're going to go, what's up with this? Now he's come out with, when you pull up on the scene, you should introduce yourself. Good afternoon. My name is Rob. I'm here to serve you. How can I help? He's never been on the street. When you pull up on the scene of a traumatic incident, it's pretty fast-paced. The guys that call us, their departments often don't understand what they're going through. We had one guy in Florida that when he talked about post-traumatic stress, they put him on administrative leave without pay 2 weeks before Christmas with 6 kids. So he called us for help, and we got him the help that he needed. We're trying to do 2 things. One is to serve families and save lives. The other side of it is to educate people about what Serve and Protect is, what post-traumatic stress is, more than that. And in many cases, we have an opportunity to open up about how God fits into all of that. Whenever somebody calls, I'll always ask them, do you come from a faith background? Because as a chaplain, you're not supposed to impose your faith, but I call what we do being sheep in wolves clothing, particularly if you've been in law enforcement. They know I get it. But, it wasn't always like that. Serve and Protect was actually birthed in church. I was sitting in church one morning. When I got there, I'm a creature of habit. Somebody was in my second row seat. And I had one of 2 choices. Get them out, or the better decision, and I could do that, but the better decision was to sit in the front row. And I was feeling uncomfortable being out of my comfort zone, and I was working with another nonprofit, and I just said, Lord, what are you saying? He put Serve and Protect on my mind. That was in May of 2011. I went home and started working on it. In July 2011, we launched Serve and Protect. And as you mentioned earlier, it was a 41-year journey. Serve and Protect was the culmination of years of what a friend asked me one time, can't you keep a job? Because it was varied experiences. I mean, my resume would give a career planner nightmares, but it was a God-ordained path. I call it a recalculated route.
So now you are a chaplain with the FBI.
Yes,
You
ma'am.
were a former police detective, and now you're helping first responders. That would include police officers, EMT, firefighters, and rightfully said,
And corrections officers.
corrections officers.
And now veterans.
Okay, who are calling.
They try and go to the VA, and they've got a wait list. And more than not, if they have post-traumatic stress, the same kind of thing happens in law enforcement. You're depressed. I got a pill.
For the person who's watching saying, well, if there is something going on after, say, for instance, someone has had to fight a fire and, you know, was injured in the process, or a police officer or a corrections officer, and they are injured and they are having some emotional problems, you know, should they go back on the street, or, you know, what is the response to that?
Well, we all face trauma. When you choose to take on that job, you see traumatic experiences, whether it's gunfire, whether it's seeing carnage from a traffic accident or a fire. My brother-in-law was a firefighter, and it shook him when he had to go into a building and 4 young people were dead. And I won't get graphic, but the point is they were really dead. And he had to experience that. That really caused him a lot of emotional stress.
As a chaplain, do you find that people who have faith have an easier ability to cope with this PTSD, or does it matter?
The problem with being a first responder in faith, we started a Bible study 4 years ago. It's called Guns and Hoses. And it's in hiatus right now, but we're getting ready to start it back up. The problem is your shift is so random. When I went on the police department, I was a Christian. I wanted to be the best Christian cop ever. And got out there on the street, and I was trained by the guys that came on in the 50s and 60s. Their solution was a little different. And I didn't get to go to church, and that's the story with a lot of them. When I say, do you have a faith background? You know, some years ago I did. But I'm going to tell you, God turned me around because it was like a plumb line. He gave me a Christian partner, and we were out one night, and I grabbed a kid that was disorderly, and I was going to adjust his attitude. So I had him by the collar, and I was getting ready to hit him, and my partner put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, you really need to do that. His name's Drew Grant. He's still my best friend. He was my first call starting Serve and Protect. Had he not done what he did, I would not be doing what I'm doing today. God put him there to recalculate my route. And, you know, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I tell that story when I go out and speak. And people need to understand. I mean, I was a cop, I was an MP, I was in radio, I was a preacher, I was in the music business. And you look at that and you go, how does that make sense? I go out and talk. I'm here with you guys. I'm comfortable. I designed our cards, our promotional materials, our website, even our mobile app that we have on our website.
So if someone is watching, they have a loved one, or maybe a first responder is watching today and they need your help, what is the first step when they make that call? What do you do?
Well, if they call our crisis line, 615-373-8000, press option 1. They will immediately be connected with one of our peer advocates. Our peer advocates are former police or first responders. And they'll talk with them. They'll find out what's going on. They'll determine what the need is. Maybe it's an addiction that they can't kick, so we get them into a rehab that is a dual diagnosis, because alcoholism, addiction to other things, is not a symptom of PTSD, it's a byproduct. And so we put them in a place, because if you don't treat the PTSD, the alcohol will return, or the addiction will. So we make sure that they get that care. But if that's not where they are, if they just need to talk to somebody, they call me. I get their insurance card information, I get their zip code, and I'll call a trauma therapist. In fact, I'll call 3 or 4 and interview them. I interview every therapist before I make a referral. Have you ever worked with first responders? I do that because once I called and the lady said, no, I don't, and I don't want to.
Wow.
And I said, good, I'm glad that you're
You're
honest.
honest.
Yeah.
But I make sure, because here's the thing, with our guys, you get one shot. When they call up, if it's not a good fit, they could walk away and go, phooey on this. So we make it as easy as possible for them to get help. Now, if they're in the residential side, we have what we call 360 care. When they're getting ready to get out, we find a trauma therapist in their area to help with the continuum of care so there's a recovery. But we take care of them, and we don't charge a dime.
Well, thank you so much for the work that you do for the individuals who put their lives on the line to protect and serve, you know, the streets of America and in other countries, I'm sure. As you said in a previous interview, to connect with Robert, go to serveprotect.org or go to harvest-tv.com.